Unpacking Segregation. The Civil Rights era took place from the 1950s to 60s and was a crucial time in American history where African Americans fought for equal rights and to end segregation. The Civil Rights Movement also aimed to change unfair laws and practices. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 helped push for changes in laws that established equal rights for African Americans. Being able to understand the history of segregation is crucial as it allows us to understand why the Civil Rights Movement happened. Segregation created an unfair system where African Americans were kept from being able to enjoy the opportunities and freedoms many Caucasians had at the time had. That is why it is essential to know the struggles that African Americans face in order to truly understand the Civil Rights Movement. Historical context of segregation. Segregation is the practice of separating people into groups based on things such as race, ethnicity, or religion. The implementation of segregation was seen in 1950 where 17 southern and border states, along with Washington, D.C., placed laws that require segregation in public schools. Segregation began in the U.S. after the Civil War as southern states wanted to maintain control over African Americans. The Jim Crow laws were then enforced to create strict racial separation in public places such as schools, buses, and even restaurants. Such laws were based on the idea of separate but equal. Areas of impact. Education. Segregation made schools for black and white students separate, yet they were not equal. The schools for black students often had less resources, which meant less teachers, poor kept buildings, and outdated books. Such issues made it more difficult for many black students to get proper education and succeed later in life as they weren't offered the resources and opportunities white students had. Housing. Redlining was a method that the governments and banks used to mark certain neighborhoods that black people lived as high-risk areas for giving loans. There were also methods where homeowners signed promising not to sell their homes to black people and other minorities. This prevented many black families and other people of color from moving to better areas and more opportunities. Voting rights. Voting rights and political representation were impacted by segregation due to the fact that many states in the South used unfair rules to prevent black people from voting. Poll taxes that were difficult to afford, literary tests along with intimidation and threats were put in place, leaving many black people to not vote, which then left them underrepresented in political issues. Socialization. Segregation made it difficult for many African Americans to live life comfortably. In restaurants, black people were not allowed to eat in areas where white people were simply refused service. In the theaters, they had to sit in separate sections, often in the back. Transportation. Segregation meant that black people had to sit in separate areas from white people. On buses, black passengers were required to sit at the back while the front seats were reserved for white passengers. Systemic racism. Segregation has created widespread systemic racism due to the fact that black people have been treated unfairly and regarded as less important than white people. Separating black and white people and leaving black people with less resources and opportunities made it more difficult for them to be able to succeed. Segregation has led to issues such as education gaps, as many black students receive lower quality education, economic inequality, internalized racism due to exposure to living in a segregated society, along with reduced social mobility. Civil rights legislation. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 made it illegal to discriminate against people based on their race, ethnicity, religion, and sex. This act also stopped discrimination in places like restaurants, hotels, and buses. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 ensured all people had the right to vote without unfair obstacles preventing them from voting. Case studies. The Brown v. Board ruled with a statement declaring that segregating students in school by race was unfair and unconstitutional. Before Brown v. Board, some schools in California still practiced segregation and would separate minority groups like Asians, Hispanic, and Black students from white students. However, after Brown v. Board, many schools in California became more integrated with a mix of students from all race and ethnic groups. Resistance and pushbacks. Many white people were upset by the idea that their children were going to school with black children. Some moved their children to public school and even protested and joined white supremacy groups that opposed racial mixing in schools. Additionally, some state and local governments in the South especially were insistent on keeping segregation as it was seen as a part of tradition and laws. Civil rights activism. Activist organizations played a crucial role in challenging segregation and advocating for desegregation. For example, Martin Luther King Jr. played an important role as leader of the civil rights movement. He participated in peaceful protests and nonviolent resistance to fight segregation. His effort helped bring key laws like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Rosa Parks was another key figure whose actions helped spark the Montgomery bus boycott. Rosa Parks' bravery helped launch a year-long boycott, which led to the ruling that segregation on buses was unconstitutional. The NAACP was one of the most important organizations in the fight against segregation. The NAACP used strategies to challenge segregation in courts, and they organized campaigns to challenge discriminatory laws and practices. Impact on America. Desegregation was able to make schools, buses, and public spaces more integrated and allowed people of different races to interact more with each other in everyday life, which helped break down old stereotypes. Desegregation also opened door for greater cultural exchange and representation and made significant changes in politics. Expat people and many other people of color were able to be better represented. Conclusion. This desegregation efforts marked by events like Brown v. Board of Education and Civil Rights Act of the 1960s aimed to end segregation and improve equality in society. Figures like Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks, along with NAACP, played major roles in promoting and change through protests, speeches, and legal actions. Significant progress was achieved through these efforts.